Hi, Lisa. Welcome.
Okay, there we go. I think we can get started now. Hi, I'm Renee Hobbs and welcome to the Media Education Lab. This is the first of two programs that we're offering to honor the 20th anniversary of September 11th. One of the things that is so powerful about the 9/11 anniversary is the fact that we just have navigated our way out of the war in Afghanistan after 20 years, the longest war in US history. And that is an opportunity for us to interrogate meaning. And so this is part of a two-part program. I want to just share with you that link that maybe you'll join us for both parts of the program. Tonight, we're going to talk about analyzing the visuals of 9/11. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about using critical literacy pedagogy to address the 9/11 phenomenon, and especially the memories that people have of 9/11. Now I'm going to share my screen with you because, I'm not sure if I'm sharing the right screen though. Let me see. Give me a thumbs up if you're seeing something that says ladder 3 on it. Are you seeing that? I'm sharing with you the wrong screen. My apologies here. Let me try that again. There we go. How about that? Give me a thumbs up if you now see my screen. Okay, so in the chat, I'm putting the link to I'm putting the link to this page, and we've put some of the materials that we're going to be using today for this session. But before we begin, let me talk about how this program is part of the Media Literacy Badge. Frank, what is the Media Literacy Badge, and what has been the history of our work, our monthly program, you and I?
Well, Renee, we really want to honor those who have been watching and participating live in our media literacy webinars. And we're going to award a badge to anyone who will write a review of this event and post it, email it to us. We want to build the media literacy community, and how we do that is by having your participation, by having you share what you've learned with others who you think may need to know about this but are not yet part of this series. And so I'm really honored, Renee, that you have created the badge opportunity. What did I leave out?
Yeah, that was pretty good. To earn your badge, you have to participate in 5 of these programs. So September, October, November, December, and January, if you haven't done any of the previous ones, right? We run these programs monthly. You can see what great topics we have tackled over the past, well, I guess we've been doing this all year, haven't we, Frank? Right? So we're really pleased to offer that, and know that we respect and appreciate your contribution. In fact, just joining us right now is Dave Jablonski. Dave is the first recipient of the Media Literacy Badge. Yo, Dave, thanks for joining us here. And I'm now going to show you the Google slide deck that we're using, and you can see some other materials that we have here for you as we're engaged in analyzing the visuals of the 9/11 anniversary. Kara and Carolyn, I'm hoping that you can introduce yourselves a little bit as we talk a little bit about the memories of 9/11. Here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to talk about the Memories of 9/11 project with Kara and Carolyn. Then we're going to do a comparison contrast activity where we take a look at two different documentaries, brand new documentaries about 9/11. Then we're going to do some analyzing images activities, and then we're going to finally end by talking about the comedy of 9/11 and what it means to invite students to think about how 9/11 is represented in comedy. Tomorrow, Carolyn is going to continue this conversation. Carolyn, do you want to talk a little bit about your plans for tomorrow and why people should come join the part 2 of this program?
Absolutely. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm in a seasonal place and I have intermittent internet, so don't hesitate to give me a thumbs down if I break up. Critical literacy asks us to step away from the usual way that we see our worlds and try to think how other people might see the same topic differently. And when Kara and I began conversations about the 9/11 project, which uses a Flipgrid, it occurred to us that the students today were not alive when 9/11 took place. And so what we ended up doing with the first project is to create a way to capture people's memories. The 20th anniversary this weekend allows us to not only respect and honor those who have lost individuals in the terrible events of 9/11, but also to think about how different people have experienced 9/11 in the 20 years since. And we'll be doing some breakout rooms and looking at ways, especially that teachers in professional development can help their students to think in broader ways than we might otherwise. So I hope you will join us tomorrow night.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, this anniversary, it comes on the heels of this longest war in US history. And this image shows the hundreds of departing servicemen just a few days ago. Kara, can you talk to us a little bit about this curriculum project that you and Carolyn did, and maybe why it's still useful and relevant to teachers and students today?
I haven't been on Zoom in 2 months. I forgot how to use it. Students today still understand empathy and sympathy. And certainly after coming out of a pandemic, I think their level of sympathy has increased. They all know somebody who has lost somebody. And so I'll just, that's kind of new. That's new since we developed this curriculum for sure. What's really been, I think, interesting for us, and I just shared with my students today, was a poster of from the museum of some of the front pages of the museum's coverage from September 12th, 2001, was like what images there were presented in newspapers. And they really were struck by font size and color and black and white and explosions versus people. And they were really intrigued by how media makers captured messages and told stories. So in here, what is probably the most poignant part of this curriculum, while there's lots of reading activities, there are lots of writing activities, there's a huge audio piece where students are able to engage in an asynchronous dialogue with people in a Flipgrid. And we are asking for people to contribute to the Flipgrid. We would love to see this become a contribution of stories from around the world. And not just from, there's a lot of representation from the East Coast. My students, and I think several students from Pennsylvania, have asked questions, but they're really curious. And at first they were like, oh, 9/11, but then they hear the stories and they're like, wow, I never thought of it this way. And it's really eye-opening for them. And again, it opens up another level of empathy and sympathy for them. And it's quite powerful. And so I really do hope that the Flipgrid is pretty easy to access if you've never used Flipgrid. I'm hoping, Carolyn, I'm not going to be able to attend tomorrow, but I'm hoping you'll be able to kind of step them through that. It's a pretty easy piece to navigate.
Yeah, check this out. My friend Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie
We can't
Coiro,
see.
and
Oh, you can't see? What? Really?
I very much remember September 11th, 2001. I was actually engaged at the top of the World Trade Center, and
There you go.
I lived on Governor's Island, which was right across from the World Trade Center.
She got engaged at the World Trade Center, right? And so after she shares her memory, then other students respond, younger students respond to her, right? So there's like this little conversation emerging as kids who weren't even born during 9/11 kind of imagine with Julie what her experience was like. So yeah, so that is pretty cool. We're really proud of the September 11th curriculum. We really, like Kara says, we do think it really addresses some of those socio-emotional issues around building connections and empathy, listening with appreciation, and realizing how memories change over time. Yeah. So
I guess I would definitely say for teachers who are going to be using this, especially after 18 months of a lot of loss, this probably has the potential to trigger some students. And certainly you might want to preface that with students that there are some pretty heavy stories here. And so you'd want to let your students know that there are stories about people who were lost in 9/11, and that might be hard to hear. And please allow them to leave the room or put their heads down or whatever they need, because
yeah. Great point. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so what we thought we would do now is we would like to model an activity that we think you could easily do in a middle school or a high school or a college classroom that we think is really terrific. And I'm going to let me share this link with you, because this is an anyone can edit, and we've got a little editing project here coming along there. I've just put that in the chat for you. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen now. We're going to do a classic activity that we like to think of as compare and contrast. Compare and contrast is really powerful, and there's a lot of new documentaries that are just coming out. This really nice review by James Poniwozak, the New York Times TV critic, reviews about 5 different 9/11 memorial media that are coming out. But Frank, in this case, we're going to be critically analyzing the trailers. What's a trailer, and why is it important for media literacy teachers to think about the power of using trailers in their teaching?
Renee, you know, and hopefully many those who are following us tonight know that a trailer is primarily marketing and promotion to get viewers interested in the larger documentary or the movie. Our colleagues in the United Kingdom have a wonderful curriculum called Teaching Trailers, and I actually created my own website because trailers are short form. and they use some of the same techniques that media makers use. And so what are the techniques? How are they persuasive? How do the words and the images work together? How do they pull us in? How do they use music, for example, to pull an emotional string? I hope I'm setting all of this up for you, Renee, because we don't have to use the movie in a lot of ways. We could use the trailer as the setup because someone has to put together the trailer, and it's usually not the director. It's some editing genius, right? And
Exactly.
so trailers are unique media texts that deserve study all their own.
Sweet. So here we go. Kara, you, me, and Frank, and everybody in the room, we're gonna notice, oh, hold on, I wanna go back. Can I go back? Oh, hold on. I wanna say this is a 1 class period activity. Before
Renee,
you do this activity,
what are we supposed to be looking at right now?
you should be seeing compare and contrast 2 trailers. Why is
We're
that
not, we're seeing
why-
analyzing the visuals of 9/11.
Why the heck is my, hold on here. I gotta
Okay.
end, the share screen is, end meeting for all. Oh, that's not good. You know what happens when you get stuck in your, oh, there we go. Oh, yeah, there we go. Now I guess I'm gonna have to play it that way just because somehow when you share your screen as a present mode, it like disables a whole bunch of things. Give
There we
me a
go.
thumbs up if you can see that. I'm not going to put it on present because that seems to screw things up for me. So this is a 1 classroom period. Before you do this activity, I suggest you read the review by James Paniwozak, and I've put a link to that. After we watch the 2 trailers, we're going to work with a partner. That's the 3 of us together, Kara, Frank, and Renee, and we are going to try to create a Venn diagram that compares and contrasts the 2 trailers. And then we're going to ask everybody in the room to do a small group breakout activity reacting to these 2 videos. Thumbs up if you understand what we're doing now. Okay, so let's watch the first video.
Good morning. How are you?
It was absolutely spectacular weather. Not humid, skies were clearer.
Smoke is billowing out of the building.
AP Network News. A plane apparently has crashed into the World Trade Center in New York.
We went from a calm, beautiful day to one in which our world changed dramatically.
Renee, we're not
September
seeing.
11th, 2001 was the
You guys are not
terrorist
seeing
attack
that?
in
We're
U.S.
seeing a
history.
solid slide and that's
Now
Oh my
experience the
God.
first 12 hours surrounding the events.
Why am I having so much
in a way the
problems with
world has
this?
never seen.
I'm telling you, if your Zoom can go wrong, it will go wrong.
Is under attack. And I'm watching a child read. Good morning. Hi. How are you?
It was absolutely spectacular weather. Not humid, skies were clearer.
Smoke is billowing out of the building.
AP Network News. A plane apparently has crashed into the World Trade Center in New York.
We went from a calm, beautiful day to one in which our world changed dramatically.
September 11th, 2001 was the worst terrorist
We're still not
attack in
seeing
U.S.
it, Renee.
history. Now experience the first 12 hours surrounding the events in a way the world has never seen.
I don't really understand why that is the case. Why is that?
America's under attack. And I'm watching
Okay,
a
I might
child
need
read.
somebody else to
The
share. Why is my sharing not working?
Renee, give me sharing abilities and I will get to the link and try it.
Give you sharing abilities. Yes, so you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. One moment, please.
I can't understand why you can't see that.
I'm looking at inside the war room.
Inside the president's war room, yeah.
Okay. Hold on.
You want to back it up and try it again?
Yeah. Yeah, we can't have a screening and discussion without viewing it. I just can't figure out why you can't see my screen. That's so mysterious.
Okay, so I'm going to try sharing my screen and we'll see if this
Yeah.
works. Here we go. Share screen with audio. Share here.
Yeah, now just hit play. Yep, there you go.
sound. Hold on, here comes sound.
It was absolutely spectacular
Got it?
weather.
Beautiful.
Not humid. Skies were clearer.
Smoke is billowing out of the
Perfect.
building.
Thank you.
AP Network News. A plane apparently has crashed into the World Trade Center in New York.
We went from a calm, beautiful day to one in which our world changed dramatically.
September 11th, 2001 was the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history. Now experience the first 12 hours surrounding the events in a way the world has never seen.
Andy Card comes up behind me and says, America's under attack. And I'm watching a child read.
We needed to move the president and get him out of there. He could be a sitting duck.
There was a call that said Angels next. Angel was the code word for Air Force One.
We worried someone in the president's circle could try to take down Air Force One.
Every plane had become a missile.
One of the targets might well be the White House.
All aircraft land as soon as possible. Mother got on the phone. She said, we're outside Milwaukee. I said, you gotta be kidding me. What are you doing there? She said, you grounded our plane?
In their own words,
she told me her plane had been hijacked and the line went dead.
That really hit home.
those at the heart of power on that unforgettable day.
We did everything we knew to do. But 3,000 people died on your watch. It just gnaws at you.
Come together to reveal what happened behind closed doors.
She took the badge from her son's dead body, gave it to the president, and said, I want you to always remember.
I remember the Secret Service screaming, "Take off your heels and run."
We've never had a crisis quite like this.
Of course, we all were hurting.
We all were terrified.
The first plane was an accident. The second one was an attack. And the third one was a declaration of war.
Whoa. Okay, now we're going to look at the second one. And the second one was called New York City Epicenters 9/11 to 2021 and a half by Spike Lee.
This is New York City, the greatest city in the world, but it is still a soft target for the virus, target for Al-Qaeda. What are you going to do?
This is Buster Rhymes.
John Stewart, New York City paramedic.
Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. Rosie Perez.
Flight attendant.
Steve Buscemi.
I am an inventor on the COVID-19 vaccine.
What hospital were you born in?
Brooklyn Hospital.
On the morning of September 11th, the whole world changed.
I don't think America was prepared for something like this to happen in our country.
When I was on the pile, when I was part of that effort, you really felt the love of humanity right there. It just lifted you.
We were driven together. What COVID did was drive us apart.
We are now the epicenter of this crisis right here in New York City.
Strangely, you feel connected to the humanity, that all of us are in this kind of boat together.
A lot of us were in the hamster wheel. COVID stopped the hamster wheel, and a lot of people fell out and didn't like what we saw in America. Didn't like the racism, didn't like the authoritarianism, didn't like the lies, didn't like the conspiracy theories. 2020, I think, put a spotlight on the worst and the best in this country, and New York City was the epicenter of the whole thing.
When I saw a little white girl put a little fist up and said, "No justice, no peace," that's when I knew this was different.
Whose streets?
Our street.
Whose streets?
Our street.
We'll get through this together. That's how we do it. That's how New Yorkers do it.
Always been people saying, New York is dead, I'm leaving, sayonara.
I heard the same thing on September 12th, 2001.
I'm not gonna get scared off. I am Brooklyn born.
Come on, Spike. You know what's up.
A knockdown is different than a knockout. And a setback is nothing more than a setup for a comeback. Get ready for the great New York City comeback once again.
Firefighters in California, floods in Mississippi and Louisiana, hurricanes in Florida. New Yorkers always step up first. Fact! New York is always the first to vote yes on emergency spending. No matter.
No matter what?
No matter what.
All right, next slide, Kara. Okay, so Carolyn, Frank, Kara, what do these two things have in common and how are they different?
I'd like to chime in primarily with tone.
Would you like me to annotate here?
I'll do the annotation while you talk.
Okay, cool.
So the first thing that struck me, and this was my first time seeing these trailers, Renee, despite all of our pre-planning, and I prefer it that way. I like to see it with everybody else. I noticed a tone, and this is a difference. The inside the president's war room is a completely different tone and approach than Spike Lee took. Spike Lee wants to celebrate New York and in fact wraps 9/11 around even more contemporary events. But tied to tone is the selection of music. So I'll leave it there.
Could I jump in?
Please.
So I'd like to piggyback on that. I feel like the tone is something that audiences should zoom in on, but I also think it's a very different voice that is established with each documentary. The former speaks from people in power, and Condoleezza Rice said, "on our watch," as if it was a personal embarrassment, a legacy that would continue. The Spike Lee narrative is about the resiliency of the people, the masses, not the privileged.
I'll also say that the selection of interviewees is at the discretion of the director. And we might ask students after they've watched these documentaries, okay, we know who was included, who was not included, who could they have interviewed, but they did not.
Yeah, I think one of the things that struck me the most was, and I think Carolyn hit on it too, was the voice of power. And in the first film, you see two very prominent people of color in Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell. And in Spike Lee's film, you do see prominent people of color, but they're kind of more everyday people. They're kind of more, they're people that are real. They're more touchable. They're relatable. And I don't know, that I think that people can relate. I think that that's going to be a film that people can relate to more, that especially people of color. I think that people on high, it's like, oh, that's that President Bush era. And I'm not.
Partially, Kara, I think that's because there's so much standard English that's used in the former, and it's a colloquial English that's used in the latter. And as we know, all composers choose every element intentionally. And I feel pretty confident that the use of voice and the colloquial versus formal English was a conscious decision.
Sure.
One thing these two things haven't, we're noticing the differences quite a lot. And I want to see if I can figure out what are the similarities. Both of these use powerful 9/11 imagery, right? So some of the powerful imagery was used in both. Are there any other similarities that you can reflect on?
There's some comments in the chat.
Gina makes a good point about both are designed to appeal to particular audiences. And she goes on to describe that the former is probably for people who did experience 9/11, and the latter is for the generation that followed.
That's great. Oh my God, you guys, that is absolutely fascinating. So now we're going to put you in a couple of breakout rooms to handle the next question. And we're only going to do this for about 4 or 5 minutes. Kara, can you go to the next question, please?
Yep, it's there.
There it is. If you could only watch one, which one would you watch and why? Okay, give me a thumbs up if you understand what you're going to be talking about. We're only going to do this for about 4 or 5 minutes. So rooms are open, make a new friend, talk it over. Oh my God, that was so fast. Whoa, that was crazy. But we must press on. Kara, can I ask you, because obviously your share screen is working and mine is not. Thank you so much for participating in that discussion. We put the links to those documentaries, one's on HBO and the other's on Apple TV. So we're really glad you had the chance to talk through your preferences. And I found that actually fascinating to talk about. Frank, take it away.
Kara, I'm going to set up the next slide by telling folks that I do a visual literacy workshop in which I distribute photos without captions to groups of students and teachers. But before I do, I use this video as a setup. You can go ahead and play it. We can't hear it.
Oh, we might need to do the share screen with the sound optimized, Kara.
Sorry. How about now?
Yeah.
Was that better?
Better.
Okay, here we go.
In this session of Take Two, we look to use visual clues to create highly informative explanations of a picture. Say cheese. You probably heard someone say a picture is worth 1,000 words. What this really means is that an image can hold so much information, it can take 1,000 words or even more to describe all the information. So check out this picture and see how much information you can extract. At first, this may look like an ordinary photo, but when you really look closely, a lot more is going on. Now, a good detective or an investigative reporter would use a strategy called the 5 W's. They'll ask themselves 5 questions: who, what, where, when, and why. In this image, we clearly see 2 men, but a detective would go beyond that. He or she would look for more clues, information beyond the obvious details. Like, who are these men? What can you tell from their clothing? Are they the same age? Are they soldiers? Are they at war or in training? Based on the terrain, what country could they be in? What time of year might it be? When are these actions taking place? What is happening now? And what might happen next? The idea is to closely examine the image for details and evidence that will give you the type of information that is not obvious right away. Try using the 5W questions to accurately describe details in the image. From the evidence you collect in examining the image, you can draw plausible inferences or likely conclusions based on what you see in the image and decide about it. The final step to completing your investigation is to summarize your findings in a few sentences. And that's it.
So one of the reasons that I like this video is because the host has talked about students as detectives looking for clues and citing evidence. So here is a portion of the worksheet that he just presented. It's available online on my website, or you can find it by that URL at the bottom of the page. And I happen to like this worksheet better than the Library of Congress's one on analyzing a photograph. So the next slide is from our friends at Reuters, the international news agency. So they have an archive of what they call defining images from 9/11, and there is a URL there for teachers who want to explore. And the next slide, both the Washington Post and the National Geographic Society also have archives of images. And so we wanted to talk a little bit or just share some of the images that we all remember as a result of 9/11.
And Frank, my question to you is, what makes, when people say that's an iconic image, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to say that an image is, or a photograph is iconic?
Well, you know, there are lots of answers to that question, Renee. I think it becomes iconic when it is used over and over again to represent an event or an action. I'm thinking of the Migrant Mother iconic photograph that was been around for 40 or 50 years and seems to come back every time there's a story about recession or depression. but today's students may not recognize the migrant mother photo. So we need to help them understand that kind of context. And
So repetition is a main feature of what makes something iconic?
I think so. And then it becomes part of the popular culture.
Fascinating.
So the next slide, Kara, is a series of questions that I propose that we have students consider. You know, who took the photo? In many ways, students never explore who the photographer was. And I guarantee you, every one of the photographers in 9/11 wrote about that experience. But how many times do we take the time as teachers to seek out the photojournalist's account? So where were they standing? What was their point of view? Where was this image published or seen? Where did you see it? What are the techniques that draw your attention? Technique is one of my favorite media literacy questions. How does the image make you feel, and who or what might be omitted? And the next slide just basically is a definition of close reading. I know most teachers understand close reading as it applies to print, but most teachers, in my experience, have little training in understanding close reading media text. So this comes from our colleagues in New Zealand when they talk about the deconstruction part of reading a media text, and you have to understand the media language that's used. And I'm a complainant because the phrase media language is not in our textbooks today, which I think it needs to be. And so the second paragraph describes what it means to be a media text. So in the next slide, here is a school-based magazine, Scholastic News. Here is the late Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream. So what are the features? What would a graphic designer do to this magazine? So we know the title, we know the illustration, we know the font, we have words in small font that we want students to pay attention to, and we have fonts in color, right? And we actually have a photograph. We know this as an image from history that they've used. And if we can move on to the next one. So here are some questions for analyzing publications. Who is the target audience? How do we know? What images and words immediately grab our attention? What might be omitted and why? This one does not apply to the school-based magazines, but to any magazine. Who benefits when you purchase a magazine? And we better define the word benefit before we begin to answer that one. And who is the publisher? Why is that important? And how could you determine the publisher? Because they're in it, of course, to make money. So the next group of slides represents, again, school-based magazines. These have just been published by Scholastic. Here's Scholastic Scope, Junior Scholastic, and Upfront 9/11. Upfront is a partnership with the New York Times. And you can see they have also used some of those iconic images. But in the next slide, I've actually pulled out Scholastic Scope because this one raised my skepticism. It looks like it might be a photograph, or portions of it might be. And folks, you have magazines at school and at home. How often have you thought about bringing them into the classroom and engaging students in a close reading analysis, right? So is this a photo, or is it an illustration, or is it a combination? And how would you know? And where, more importantly, where could you go to verify it? You know, if that's an actual image of smoke billowing from New York City, taken from rather far away, can we find that image anywhere else? And I think it's really important in 2021 that students must know how to verify what they are reading and what they are seeing. And I think that's a really important 21st century skill.
Hey, Frank,
yes.
Is there anybody in the room who can help me understand Rescue at the Water's Edge, the story of September 11th, 2001, and the biggest boat rescue in history? Is anybody in the room can remember or refresh my memory on what the heck is this about?
I believe there was a massive effort to get boats across the river to rescue people who could not use conventional transportation. And maybe it's one of those untold stories that is now being told for the first time.
So what we're seeing perhaps is somebody who was in a boat approaching Lower Manhattan.
Sure.
I would have thought this was a fake picture, but now I'm not so sure.
Got it. In the
So-
interest of time, maybe can we move on?
Sure.
I hear somebody wanting to make a comment. Let's
I
see
was
who that
thinking it
is.
was they were going away. I think those are people being rescued from Lower Manhattan and going back over toward New Jersey.
Ah,
Yeah. So
thank you for that.
We can go by this slide and the next one to the next one. So this week, the New Yorker magazine has come out with this cover, and when I saw it, I didn't understand anything in the cover. I had to actually dig a little bit deeper to find out what the meaning was. I know that those are two people. I don't know if those two people are significant, but the illustrator says these are two people who are experiencing the day firsthand during a moment of comfort and consolation on the rebuilt site of the World Trade Center. So again, students who might see a cover but don't really understand it. And you might notice also that they've taken the color completely out of this cover, right? It's in black and white. The next one, please. So popular culture magazine like People magazine, and the angle that they took was to interview the children of 9/11. And if you go to the next slide, I don't know how many people would even notice that little brown circle down there, which is promoting a documentary on the Discovery Channel. Did the Discovery Channel pay to have that on the cover? You know, what's the relationship between the owners of People magazine and the owners of the Discovery Channel? How many people think about that? I do when I see something like that, right? And next. So here is Atlantic magazine, The Atlantic. If you see it on the newsstand, it might have this, this flap over to the left. And if you take the flap off, we now see it is a burnt wallet. Is there a story behind that wallet? Is this a magazine that you want to pick up and read? Who is the audience for The Atlantic, for example? Is this a magazine that we might find in middle schools or high school? You know, next. Two other publications that I just pulled independently this week. The Independent Review, using an iconic image, and Firehouse, a national magazine for firefighters. Never forget. Yeah. And Time magazine decided to go with a mostly black and white image of the two lights emanating and reaching into the sky, 9/11, 20 years later. And Smithsonian decided to focus on one person on the cover as they look back on 20 years. I thought this was interesting. This is a 9/11 graphic novel coloring book, right? I guess it's a way to engage young people, again, in the story, right? And let's keep going. In the Shadow of the Fallen Towers is a relatively new book, and I think I pulled a page out of it so we could see what it looks like. So this is, again, one illustrator's representation of what he or she saw. Several others here, I Survived, and the 9/11 series. These are two recent books that have been published and released this month. And then we have the memes. Renee, I know you want to talk a little bit about the memes.
Well, you know, Frank, will you do me a favor? Will you go, Carol, will you go back to the book covers for a second here? I think it's really interesting how that's just one slide back. Yeah, I think it's interesting how in the 20th anniversary, these two book covers, at least, Frank, have, I would say, interesting color choices, right? Not as dark, not as black, not as gray as I might have expected. The blue one is got, you know, it's a sky. with towers that once were, right? With the focus of aftermath and legacy, blue sky being a kind of optimistic color. And then the other cover also has kind of it's got a comeback story as the theme. So what's really interesting is the way in which the new story of 9/11 is more, I don't want to say optimistic isn't the right word, but there's definitely a tonal shift. And I guess that's a theme that we've been exploring all night, hasn't it? So let's
Renee,
turn to the question of humor, huh?
Well, before you get there, this reminds me that the 9/11 Commission report, if anybody saw it at the bookstore, was about this thick, right? Well, there is a 9/11 Commission report graphic novel that was endorsed by the 9/11 commissioners. For those of you who are librarians and did not know that, you might want to consider that graphic novel for your collection.
Yeah, and I'm noticing in the chat, Clancy, thank you so much for suggesting the I Survived book. And now we're going to turn to disaster humor because TJ says, let's talk about it. Is it appropriate to bring disaster humor into the classroom? Why or why not? We have only about 9 minutes to explore that question, but if you take a look at the next clip, we'll watch maybe a minute. We'll watch a minute. Did they check the beard?
Flying back from New York.
Can you hear it?
BA,
Yep.
First class to London, JFK. The whole week in America leading up to that flight, on every channel on TV, there was a rolling ticker tape that said America on red alert, okay? And every bulletin said, we have an intel that there's going to be another 9/11. This weekend in New York or LA, do not fly unless you absolutely have to. I had to, I was filming. And if you fly, be extra vigilant. Okay, so I'm there. I'm the only one in the first class lounge, right? And I'm still trying to remain philosophical about it. I'm thinking, right, today's the day you definitely don't try and get a bomb on the plane. Do you know what I mean? You think, no, everyone's, wait till Monday, right? And I'm there, and about 15 minutes before boarding, into the first class lounge comes this guy. I don't know whether he was North African or Middle Eastern, but he had all the gear and beard, everything. Steel attaché case, okay?
Okay, you can pause it. You know where this is going, right? He's going to activate all kinds of Muslim stereotypes and reflect all kinds of fear and anxiety. Is it ever appropriate to address the bleak, dark, and sometimes troubling comedy around this issue? Why or why not? I'll hear from Frank, Kara, and Carolyn. What are your thoughts on the topic?
Renee, I'm reminded of the late night comedy shows right after 9/11 and how difficult it was for them to get back to work. It just hit home for everybody. But get back to work, they did. It's this is a very sensitive subject. If we lose people from a hurricane in New Orleans, is that worth joking about? I don't think so. But it's a really good question for discussion in a classroom. When is it appropriate to treat a major tragedy humorously?
What are your thoughts about the matter? Would you bring dark, bleak humor into your classroom? Why or not, why not?
I probably wouldn't. And Frank, I don't know if you remember, but right after 9/11, probably before memes were even a thing, I sent you something that you were so angry with me. I don't even know if you knew I sent it. But it was I don't know, it was some Sesame Street character flying around toward the tower, and your reaction was visceral. I mean, it hit a hot spot, and I don't know. I I don't think we can. I mean, it was insensitive of me then, and I think we can talk about why people laugh at these things, but I don't think, I don't know. I think we can talk about why do people bring humor to these kinds of topics, but I don't know if I would show that clip as an example.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Talk about it, but don't show the clip. Carolyn.
Now, I'll be the devil's advocate here. Humor allows us to show our greatest vulnerabilities. It allows us to examine ourselves and make sense of an uncertain world. I might use humor about 9/11. I would scaffold it. I would study humor at least slightly first with the students in a general way. Then I would ask them to maybe do work with a meme maker that was not particularly about 9/11, and then maybe shift the power of the discussion to the students. I worked in a school district that was very conservative. I was always in the principal's office because I did social justice pedagogy with my students, and I learned that it's better to make sure that the conversation is driven by the students. Let them discuss.
Wow. Now we'll hear from you in the room. Unmute your microphone. What's your take on this? Disaster comedy, is it appropriate for media literacy education? Appropriate for your school, your students, your context? Why or why not? Unmute your microphone and offer your perspective.
I think it would be difficult in the classroom because I think about my own students. They have a different sensibility than I do. Like working in a newsroom, humor was a way to cope. Dark humor was a way to cope, and we understood each other. But I'm not sure I would bring that into the classroom space because they're not in those experiences, and they have a different way of looking at things. And I'm not a funny person, as I say in the chat, and so I'm not sure I could do it. But they would have to lead. It would have to be sort of them leading and me sort of cultivating that.
Thank you for sharing. Clancy, what are your thoughts? Would you bring disaster humor into a classroom to unpack it? Why or why not?
I think if it were a class about humor, then I would. Otherwise, I think that it would come across as me really going out of my way to say, oh, let's spend some time in class talking about disaster humor. I mean, because I guess like there's so many things you could do in the classroom that I would really have to have a compelling reason to do that.
Great point.
I don't know. I mean, like, I said in the chat that Wanda Sykes had some funny material about 9/11. I mean, it was about 9/11. It was really more like material about the aftermath of 9/11 and the atmosphere of paranoia and fear, and she was kind of poking fun at like Dick Cheney and people like that. And I don't know, I guess that's not really quite the same as humor specifically about the attack. It was kind of like afterwards. And I don't know, I guess there would have to be a compelling reason.
Thanks for sharing. Dave, would you bring the topic of disaster humor into your classroom with your students? Why or why not?
I think I feel a little bit like Clancy. I think if there's a way to kind of frame disaster humor kind of in a sense of trying to demystify dark humor, gallows humor in that space. But I would be, I guess, cautious about talking about it in the context of 9/11 because the students I teach now didn't live through it. And so because we're not maybe spending a whole lot of time on 9/11, the thought that like a meme is their big takeaway from the experience when it's such a profound thing that as Spike Lee points out, we're all still processing, would be really problematic for me. I think there's opportunities for students to go on, the web and bring media to class, right? And that student who kind of pushes the line, that can be kind of a learning opportunity for everyone. As we look at something that's maybe a little bit like off color or dark, and it's a teachable moment to see what students respond to that as being really funny or dank, as the students sometimes say, versus like something that's maybe a more traditional, visual or meme or something of that sort.
I have one other really quick point. I think I would be less likely to use to talk about disaster humor in class in a required class than I would in an elective class.
Right. And so then you're really speaking about the makeup of the participants and why they're there, right? What a fascinating conversation. This is why we love this work, Frank, because we learn so much from the discussion and the dialogue. I want to give a big round of applause to Frank, to Kara, and to Carolyn for joining us tonight. Thank you so much. I do want to share my screen and remind you that we're going to continue this conversation tomorrow night. So do plan on marking your calendar for tomorrow night at 7:00. We're going to continue this conversation. Carolyn's going to lead us, and we're going to have by the end of it, we're going to have some really thoughtful and really well-articulated perspectives on teaching the 9/11 anniversary. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Renee Hobbs, and you've just spent an hour with the Friends of the Media Education Lab. So thanks again. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Renee.
Bye, everybody. See you tomorrow night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.